I love the popcorn.
Yeah, so that's my logo for Brain Rot. I've got my
I
VHS.
love the popcorn. It's
my
a great
popcorn
logo, dude.
with the
I
eye.
love
Thank
the
you, man.
Popcorn as an adjective for a kind of entertainment
Yeah.
is such a great thing. And I worry that people don't understand sometimes, especially in foreign countries. When I say, hey, I just did a little popcorn movie,
Right.
Or I saw a great popcorn double bill.
Yeah.
And it's like when Tarantino finally communicated to everybody what grindhouse meant. There's grindhouse, there's popcorn.
Yeah,
we know
right.
the obvious ones, but it's nice. It's a nice delineation because sometimes that's what you're in the mood for. Every once in a while you watch a sentimental movie or a serious movie, but sometimes we just want our popcorn.
Exactly. And that's pretty much all I watch. But first of all,
Yeah.
I'll just say, Robert, welcome to Brain Rot. What an honor.
Thank you.
And I have to admit, it was very hard to not say welcome to Brain Rot, bitch, but I chickened out. I don't think we're there yet. We'll see how it goes. How are you, though? I know you just had COVID, right?
I just, it's my poor wife. Thank God I had everything planned out. I got knocked down in Italy, and I just sat in a room in self-quarantine. Of course, I had a great view. It was on the Isle of Capri, on the backside. But Nancy just went out and did everything. And then I started feeling better about, I don't know, 3 or 4 days ago. And I'm not positive. I tested negative, but boy, I had all my vaccines and everything, I was sort of let my guard down. And this is the thing to remember for your mom and dad or anybody, it really knocks us older people for a loop. That's why everybody's got to be careful.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fully vaxxed and I got it every time it did the rounds. But to be honest, my immune system is like a virus's dream. If there's something going around, it's going to get me. And when I was a kid, I was like a sickly Victorian child, just constantly in bed, longing for the outside. I was one of those.
Gothic, lots of velvet.
Yes, quite. And a bedpan. Firstly, today I want to talk quickly a little bit about your new documentary, Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, which I had the pleasure of watching last week. I absolutely loved it, and I have to say, as an actor myself, I think the most prominent takeaway I had of the documentary is your love and passion for acting, the actual craft itself. And I think it's so easy for people to just see Freddy Krueger as an almost separate entity to the performer behind it. Was that something you wanted to get across, the actor before, during, and after Freddy?
I think I wanted to impart the fact that survival is really the theme of the doc, and that happy accidents can occur in a career that you never see coming, and you might not even want, and you need to know how to deal with that and embrace it. And then the hindsight, looking back, and you realize, oh my God, I've started movies with Henry Fonda. I've started movies with Jeff Bridges. I starred in movies with Lillian Gish from the silent screen, Jeff Bridges, Sally Field, Arnold Schwarzenegger, James Earl Jones. And you go, whoa, you forget that because it's just a cumulative thing. And you always learn something from each of those experiences. And that's part and parcel of an actor's life. Hey, fiddly dee, an actor's life for me. And, the other thing is that I say especially to actors that have come from the theater, as I have, occasionally on stage, you get it right, or you get it perfect to your standard. Now, you can also have those nights where you feel great and the audience isn't with you. And you can have those nights where you feel like maybe you're 70% and the audience loves you. You can't do anything wrong. But film, every time I work, I'm 76 years old. I'm going to do 2 movies later this year. I have a movie coming out this year. Every time I work, I'm nervous. Every time I work, I learn something new. Every time I work, I'm not happy with some takes. It's just the nature of the art.
Yeah.
And so you're always doing something for posterity that you're not completely happy with. You hear actors talk about driving home after a gig.
Yeah.
You go, oh God, that's what that line meant. Ah, or you're driving home and oh, that's what that scene was about. Or, oh, I should have done it this way, or I should have done it that way. Well, that can haunt you. That can haunt you for years, just like not getting a role in an A movie, an A-list movie, or having a movie where the financing never comes through. That could have been, a huge changing element of your life. So you have to live through that and be mature and let it go. It's difficult. My wife constantly scolds me for, I complained about a project I directed for years, and I've complained about other projects, that I didn't get or that didn't get made. And, who would I be had that been made?
Right.
6 months in Spain with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Paul Verhoeven,
Right.
Who would I be now? Would I be the new Klaus Kinski, or who knows? But, you just have to let that go. And that's also part and parcel of the wisdom and survival of being an actor, and you have to learn to count your blessings, all of them, doing playing bad guy number 3 on an episode of Charlie's Angels in 1974 and getting a check yesterday for it, because now it's being rerun after
of course, yeah.
TV Guide channel, or and just laughing at that and loving it, loving that check for $13,
Well, I even get less than that, because I started acting when I was a kid, and every now and then something will come through and it will literally be 6 pence in royalties, because it was sold to another country and it's being repeated on some channel with dubbing. And
that usually means that sooner or later you will get a nice check for that.
Well,
because that's that little clearance. That's that weird little legal clearance check.
Right.
I know if they're really small, 6 pence sounds pretty low, but we used to have a bar in right near Universal Studios on Ventura Boulevard at the edge of Studio City in Hollywood, called Residuals. And I think it was owned by the producer of the old Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, a famous talk show host. And the lower your residual was, you had a chance of being on the wall. And then you drink free that.
That's brilliant.
And you literally would see residuals for a penny. Somebody would bring in a residual for a penny, from some, some old TV show. But it was so fun. I love that conceit. I think it's still there. You might make the wall, they frame it for you. They also there was a very famous makeup man that used to drink there with, of all people, Linda Blair's brother. And they had these great face masks over the door of all these famous movie stars who had done special effects makeup. And it was like their death mask.
Right.
And then a residual, for 12 cents, for some episode of Police Story or Police Woman, Police Dog.
It's exactly that. I think the thing that drove me crazy about it, that made me laugh more, is the fact that my agent still took their cut and got it down to 6 pence.
Well, in the States, I think they're allowed those first 2 runs, those big runs. They come in and they take their piece out of that. After that, I think it's all yours.
No, not here. They took about 3 pence from me.
Well, I know it gets different. Yeah, it's different everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really nice in the documentary to see Galaxy of Terror get some screen time, because that is a favorite of mine. And you can say what you want about Corman. His results were always delicious. How was he to work with?
Well, I used to meet Roger in his really fancy offices in Brentwood, and he was he's really handsome and really tall. Looks like a movie actor. And he was always really polite with me, and he never made me feel like I was auditioning. He just wanted to meet me. It was just really good business. But when he had his new studio down in Venice, if you were doing second unit, it was a little ripe. It was like flies on peanut butter. That was about the best you could hope for. But we were all down there, this eclectic cast, and the guy that created Red Shoe Diaries, Zalman King, and he also did 9.5 Weeks. Mm-hmm. And I knew Zalman as this sort of breakthrough, broken-nosed Jewish leading man who had done this famous TV series with the great Lee J. Cobb from On the Waterfront. And he had done this series called The Lone Lawyers and really changed the concept of leading man for television. And Zalman and Sid Haig, the little girl from Happy Days, you know, and the wonderful Broadway star who'd done Damn Yankees and hung out with Bob Fosse for years. And you got Bob Fosse's stories and the stars of Twin Peaks, the future stars of Twin Peaks. And it was just this strange, wonderful cast. And Eddie Albert Jr. sort of was our leader. And he had all these great pieces of advice to give us about working in Europe. And, you know, his father was the great Eddie Albert Sr. And he would take us to his house in Malibu and feed us all big vegetarian lunches. And when we weren't doing that, we were all in the new Venice, California, which was just becoming hip and cool, and going to the new funny, wonderful restaurants there for like the 3 martini lunch, you know, and then back to toiling for Roger. But it was, you know, down and dirty. I remember I had the worst dressing room in the world. It was 2 book hinged, pinned hinge flats, theater flats, and a plastic chair with a cigarette burn on it, and 2 bent wire hangers on a dowel that, you know, I used to always mess my hair up. And across from me was the art department. And there was a guy with long, scraggly blonde hair. And he was one of the art directors. And he was designing one of the monsters or something. And then he'd crinkle it up and throw it on the floor. And I would go get them and flatten them out and then pin them up in my terrible dressing room to make it look nicer. And the guy was James Cameron.
Of course it was.
And he went from doing Galaxy of Terror and standing in line, you know, with his clutching his $2.50 to see Alien, and the next one he directed. Right. And that's the Hollywood success story that still happens all the time. And I wish I would have saved those crumpled up.
Oh yeah, quite. Yeah. Imagine.
Because he's an artist, you know, his storyboards are brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, he really is. Something else I loved seeing you talk about was, it was refreshing to see that you sort of say that you surrendered to Freddie at some point, and you know what he had become, because you see so many actors who are, say, perhaps best known for one specific role, and they really try to shed that connection, but you embraced it. But there was a time, right, when you sort of found it limiting.
Well, the only thing I know that Freddie ever cost me was a directing job, directing a romantic comedy. And that hurt me. But Freddie got so big internationally. And when people chant your name when you're getting off a plane in Spain or Tokyo, this is something they never prepare you for, and something your acting teacher or you never learn this, and how important that actually is to a career. I've now worked probably 15 or more jobs around the world. And I've worked in Africa, and I've worked in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and I've worked in Tokyo, and I've worked in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and I've worked in Acapulco, and I've worked in St. Petersburg and Romania, Bulgaria, let alone London, Rome, Barcelona, Madrid, Sicily, Taormina, Palermo, all over the world. And these adventures of a career, some good movies, some not so good, but the adventures and the shared experience with the crew and actors and my wife, it just made for this wonderful adventure of a life. And that moment of time when you discover that you're international, that was a combination of V, the series, television series V, and Freddie back to back. And I knew that was important. And Wes had taught me to respect horror. And then about 10 years ago, I had this repressed memory of being a small boy and going to my godfather's home. And my godfather was a huge book distributor for Simon and Schuster, the largest distributor west of the Mississippi. And he had an entire room of his ranch house with a kidney-shaped swimming pool out in the valley. An entire room were coffee table books. And I remember this coffee table book and it was the movies, big red cover. And there was a whole section on the golden age of horror. And even before that, there was a section on Lon Chaney.
Yeah.
Man of 1,000 Faces. And I was obsessed with this. There were pictures of him where he'd put a boiled egg placenta over his eye to play a blind man.
Right.
So that's probably the first makeup contact lens, right? This
Sure.
milky placenta that actually fit over his own eye and made him look blind, that milky look that we take for granted now, that's done in CGI now. And I loved all these different looks of him in a row. And I would always go into my godfather's office or the room that had all those books and look at that. And there was a picture of Frankenstein with the little girl before he throws her in the lake. And there was a picture of the daughters of Dracula, pre-Hays Code, in these diaphanous dresses, and you could see their nipples underneath, you know. And I was just, you know, the eroticism. And I'm a kid, you know, but it's still, my hormones are wackadoodle. And I love that. And I would mow lawns with the old fashioned lawnmowers. And my friends and I would spend all morning convincing one of our mothers to drive us in one of those old station wagons with the wooden sides. And we would go to the Saturday matinee. And there we would see Horrors of the Black Museum, or we'd see Forbidden Planet with Robbie the Robot, or we would see 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea with James Mason and Peter Lorre and the giant squid with his beak, you know, and the sailors with suction blemishes all over them from the suckers on the tentacle of the giant calamari. And I remembered that Robert Englund. That was me. That was all real. And I had suppressed it. You know, I had become that guy in the corduroy jackets, you know, who'd studied with the faculty of the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, you know, and I wanted to be Peter O'Toole, and I wanted to be Alan Bates, and I wanted to be Albert Finney, and before that, James Dean and Brando, and I was evolving, you know, I was this evolving guy. And now I wanted to be Strother Martin or Warren Oates or Bruce Dern or one of the great character actors in Hollywood. But, you know, we go through these stages, but I had forgot that, completely forgot that. And it changed the way that I hand the love back now to fans, because I realized how much that meant to me, how much Lon Chaney meant to me, and how much Karloff meant to me, and how much the Hammer films meant to me. I can remember unsnapping a girl's bra in the front seat of a car and kissing with tongues and being worried about my breath and my deodorant and looking over her shoulder through the windshield of the car at the drive-in movie. And it was some sexy Hammer film. And Barbara Steele was being tortured. And it was like, that was turning me on more than the real life girl. What's wrong with you? But it's just that I remembered in hindsight how important and visceral the horror movie, or how the fantasy movie could transport you, or how we would love a great science fiction ending to an episode of Twilight Zone as a child. And it changed the way I respected my fans.
Wow. That's really interesting to hear, because I was going to ask, it's so funny that you brought up that story, because I was going to ask, before you're dabbling with the genre in, you know, Eaten Alive and Dead and Buried and all those sort of things, what was your view on the horror genre? But that suppressed memory just shows that it was there.
No, I remember being very broke and very poor in Hollywood, and I would star in a movie, but then it would take a year to come out. Dude, star in a movie like Buster and Billy, or I'd star in a movie like Stay Hungry. It took a year to come out, and you're living on the money you saved and unemployment checks but I remember discovering the Dr. Phibes movies with Vincent Price and going to see those, you know, on Hollywood Boulevard, you know, and then going out for a taco afterwards, and when we talk about it, how much we loved it, Theater of Blood, all those
That's my
great,
favorite.
yeah, and then finding, rediscovering Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, and then obviously there were falling in love with all the Hollywood character actors I did, like Bruce Dern, people like that, but also rediscovering the American cinema, as well as rediscovering some new horror. I remember there's a great John Schlesinger horror movie. I can't think of the name of it right now. Helen Shaver is the star, Martin Sheen, but spiders come out of a pockmark out of a blackhead in somebody. It freaked me out. It's
Nightmare
John
fuel.
Schlesinger. It's the guy that directed Midnight Cowboy doing horror. But I mean, there was some great horror movies along that time, besides The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby and The Omen. There's one with George C. Scott called The Changeling.
Oh, that's one of the most incredible
horror
movies
God,
of all time.
Yeah. So I think we have to give kudos to that A-list horror, also along with the low rent, cheap thrills horror at the same time. And another movie that I was absolutely obsessed with as a child, obsessed. I probably saw it 10 times. And again, repressed memory, was the science fiction film Them.
Yeah, with the ants. Yeah.
And that soundtrack, the sound effect for the ants, and that movie's all done cinema verite, handheld. It's like a French New Wave movie, running around LA sewer system, But all that stuff is in there. It's buried in there, but it's in there. And I was just flipping around last night, and I was watching a wonderful documentary on the history of gay people in Los Angeles, when they were welcomed, then post-war, they were not, and then they were welcomed again, and the sort of story, the sort of
the journey of that
gay bar, and how the gay bar evolved. And when it became safe for people to come out, not to become closeted anymore. And one guy was a professor, and he shows his gay culture students, the film Them, which is thought of as anti-communism. But he said at that same time, there was this huge anti-gay thing going on, and it was also couched in that.
Yeah, you can read it that way.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
You can, and that there was all of that kind of stuff going on, But it was just so amazing to me. Somebody else loves Them. I love Them.
Such a good film.
Yeah.
It's cracking. I want to ask quickly, because I know we're a bit pushed for time, about 976 Evil, because obviously that was your directorial debut. And I love this film. And I rented it on VHS so many times as a kid that the vendor eventually just told me to keep it. And he was like, just don't bring it back, because I was renting it so often. And I know that you've sort of been vocal and said that you had a pretty sort of rough time on it, and it wasn't quite what you were expecting.
No, the filming of that film was a great experience.
Right.
Nothing bad. I had a new special effect company who had been very magnanimous, very open with us. But what happened was, the father and son had a falling out. And simultaneously, they also got a Sylvester Stallone movie. So we became like the Poor Country Cousins almost overnight. And so I had to deal with all of that and try to make sense of that, and try to still get all of my promised effects, special effects. It was I believe it was called Intervision. Intervision was the kind of effect. It was a new concept. And along with that, I had won over my producer, the woman producer, Lisa Hansen. She'd become a friend, and over copious cocktails, I'd convinced her of my vision, and we're working along, and everything's going along fine. And then she got ill, and another producer took over, and he had come to believe that horror films had to be like comedies. They had to be like 80 minutes long or 89 minutes. It was just some strange rule that he thought was true. And I tried to explain to him that The Exorcist, the running time of The Exorcist, and Rosemary's Baby and other films, and that a horror movie, isn't like that. It doesn't need to have that pace that an action film has, because there's always going to be more revealed and always more scares to come. And I just hit the wall, and it became very frustrating. And I had shot these linking shots all the way through the movie. The young, beautiful boy would take a hit on his cigarette, and you'd see the cherry, the ash glow.
Mhm.
My camera would push into that. And then that red glow would turn into the brake light of a car.
But yeah,
My
that
detective.
transition.
I did things
Yeah.
like that all the way through to link it, just to link it. And these weren't expensive things. They didn't cost anything, but they took the time to shoot them. That's all. And it was my linkage shots. Well, they took them all out of the movie,
Mm.
so that the cuts in between sequences now are very harsh,
Yeah.
in the storytelling. And that kind of broke my heart. And I think that's what you're talking about. I've given
Yeah.
interviews about that. It's like it didn't save any money. And if you put all those shots back in, it would probably only make the movie 3 minutes longer or something,
Right.
or 4 minutes longer at the most. But and my wife constantly, scolds me for years and years and years. I couldn't get over that. But now it's just out there in the ether, and it's gently and gradually on its way to becoming a certified cult film,
Mhm.
like my English film, Last Showing,
Yes.
and like Leslie Vernon, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, Behind
Yeah.
the Mask. These are like on their way to becoming full-fledged, cult films, prestige little cult films, low-budget cult films, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
I'm quite happy.
And I think something that really just elevates it is the great Sandy Dennis's performance in that movie,
Oh.
because the character is so heightened, and yet Sandy Dennis plays it completely straight, and that marriage is absolute perfection. What was it like
It's
to direct her?
it's that melodrama. And what
Yeah.
I told Sandy and the boy was, you could think of it Tennessee Williams. You could actually think of that a little bit Tennessee Williams, and the Gothic mother, the Gothic
Mhm.
Williams mother, but not a complete mad horror character. But who's wonderful in that movie is the character Hoax,
Yes.
Stephen Jeffries.
Yeah, of
And
course.
Stephen is so wonderful in Fright Night. But
Mhm.
there's a movie with Christopher Walken and Sean Penn and the great Candy Clark from American Graffiti and The Man Who Fell to Earth.
Yeah.
There's a film called At Close Range, and Stephen Jeffries has a death scene in that. That is the saddest little moment in the history of film. It's just so sad and
I've
tragic.
not seen it.
And Stephen was gone for a while. I think he was living in Europe, but Stephen's back. He's working again.
Yeah,
And,
I saw that.
I saw him, and he's got that great face.
Mhm.
He and Dennis Christopher have that great sort. Stephen's hair, he had great 80s hair, but he has that great face. And Dennis Christopher looked like a Norman Rockwell painting come alive. And Stephen's face has aged now, and he's just got this great character face that he can
Yeah.
use for so many things. There's so many ways you could cast Stephen. And I love when Stephen his character is self-conscious on film. It's a real trick he has that I think is quite wonderful. And he brings the camera and the lens into his little world. And I just hope I have all good hopes and feelings, because Stephen's, a lot younger than I am. And I think it'd be real interesting to Stephen play, a serial killer or
Yeah, quite.
I think he's got a couple of great roles up his sleeve.
He's got it in him, definitely. Well,
Yeah.
we're just coming to the end of our time now, so I have one last question for you. What is your Nightmare on Elm Street ranking?
Well, it's kind of hard to do it all. I think my favorite is Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Yes.
I think the fan favorite is Part 3, Dream Warriors.
Yeah.
My favorite performance of mine
Mm,
is Nightmare 4, the Rennie Harlan,
love it.
because Rennie left me alone, and I kind of danced Freddy a little bit in that, because by then I was confident enough. I realized Freddy's in a dream. He's not in reality. He's not walking around in the
course.
street smoking a cigarette. So he can paint himself into the landscape of his victim's imagination and subconscious sort of landscape of the nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
So I was allowed to do that. Rennie let me go. So that's what that is. I think that the most underrated one is Nightmare 5.
Dream Child.
Yeah, that's the most underrated. I think the one that might really lend itself to a great remake, especially if we could get into the sexuality of the leading boy and Freddie manipulating his decision whether to come out or not, would be Nightmare 2. I don't think we should touch Nightmare 1 again. I think
me neither.
Nightmare 1 has that strange, old, soiled children's book collecting.
I know exactly what
children.
you mean.
It has that. It's like King Kong.
Yeah.
There's something about watching the original King Kong and watching the original Nightmare on Elm Street. It's like turning the pages of a book that meant something to you when you were a child.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this strange old, it's like going back in time without
this relic, this special.
And of course, the remake was so disappointing to the fans. So I say that would be my thing. Now, part 6, you can't remake part 6. You would have to completely redo it and attack the popular culture of today. So you would have to attack selfies and BMX bikes.
Yeah, because it's meta and
all the things in
self-referential.
the culture today that you would want to attack if you redid part 6. And you can't really do Wes Craven's New Nightmare because that's Wes's movie to the fans. But you certainly can remake 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly believe that those could be remade. And I think that maybe they should start with 3, leave 2 as sort of a standalone, and then just do 3, 4, 5, Now, in terms of originality, no one yet has made a great, except for Tobe Hooper's pilot for the television series.
Yeah.
Nobody's really made a definitive prequel.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a somewhere
there's room there.
Yeah. And then there would be the obvious sequel to me would be the sequel to Freddy versus Jason. And that would be a graphic novel, Guardians of the Galaxy, larger than life, Deadpool style, graphic novel style. And I would love for them to do Freddy versus Jason versus Ash.
Oh my gosh. I mean,
totally kinetic horror, and let Ash win.
Right. Yeah.
Let him win.
Let the good guy
saving
win.
Saving the world from sequels.
Nice.
Win. Yeah.
All right. Let's greenlight it.
Put Bruce Campbell on a diet and give him the 300 makeup airbrush effect on his tits. And let's make that movie.
Sounds good to me. Listen, Robert, they say don't meet your heroes, but you've completely debunked that theory. So thank you so much. This was wonderful. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And again, compliments on your logo, sir.
Yes, thank you. Get in.
Bye-bye.